Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Screen Society podcast, a podcast that covers all things TV, film, and everything in between. I'm your host, Logan, and today we are jumping back into our recap of The Pitt, which is currently streaming on HBO Max. We are season 2, episode 2. So if you have not been able to listen to season 2, episode 1 recap, you might want to go back and do that and then come back to this episode, as there, of course, will be spoilers that we get from going into episode 2 of The Pitt. A lot of things going on this July 4th weekend, not when I'm recording this, but that is when the show is taking place this year. It is on July 4th, which brought up a lot of interesting comments and questions. And of course, the people that are going to heavily review the show were questioning as to why Langdon started back on July 4th, why some of these people are working on July 4th, why Robby's last day is July 4th, and also why there's a deposition in the middle of a national holiday. But again, it's TV, baby. It's it's just what happens sometimes with continuity, sometimes with just the storytelling. You've got to be able to fit some of this stuff in. So I'm going to look past it, and I think it gives us a more positive feel of this show if we can just look past some of those minor details, because it really, at the end of the day, does not really impact. I mean, if this happens on July 5th, the same exact show, same exact storylines, doesn't really change much, especially right now, because we've not really gotten anything with the celebration of July 4th. We got no missing limbs or explosions or anything like that. So just a very busy day in the Pit, like always. July being a very interesting month in a hospital, because you do have a bit of that summer rush where people do tend to do things where they travel and visit different places and they have medical emergencies. There's a lot more outdoor activities going on. So people are visiting the ER for different things that they're doing outdoors, whether it's be working or visiting or traveling or just enjoying themselves during the summer months of July. I think that it's an interesting time because and this is something that they covered. I forget on which podcast I was listening to, but they made a really good point that this is a time, and as someone that works in a hospital as a communications specialist, I can agree with this, is that this is a time where you have a little bit of a transition between attendings, residents, the med students coming in and coming out. You've got the newer the new med students coming in, and they're now carrying the torch that has been passed on to them from the year prior. So you got some transition in the hospitals, and that's what we see in the Pit, especially in season 2, episode 2, as we get a lot more from Ogilvy and Quan. And I'm really excited to talk about where I think they're headed with those character arcs, and I think that they do a very nice job, because it allows for Dr. Whitaker to have more of an impact on what's going on in the day-to-day, and you can see him trying to navigate still throughout the medical field, as he's just a second year doctor in this episode, or in this season as well. So let's get into it. 8 a.m., the synopsis on IMDb: distracted by her impending deposition, King suffers a fall. Then, while Al-Hashimi attempts to revolutionize the department's technology, different challenges occur, and Javadi sizes up the competition. During all of this, episode 2 was directed by Damian Marcano, and Damian, in his work, is known for American Gigolo, Cheese, and Winning Time, Rise of the Lakers Dynasty. And he's a writer, cinematographer, director, and has acted some. So Damien takes the helm. John Wells did episode 1. So I really like this. I like when directors rotate, and I think they do this really well in TV nowadays, especially the main writers stay put, because you want that continuity. You want the same kind of storytelling, but you do have a different vision, a different point of view on how we're going to tell the stories visually. Obviously, he can impact and critique some of the writing or change some of the writing in the way that he feels like the story should be told. And if you do this correctly, if you have good writers, good directors, people that have worked on the show before, or people that know people who have worked on the show, they can really use that collaborative spirit to build on to this next episode in a different point of view, different lens. And I think that's very fascinating, just because you get the same story but a different twist because somebody else is telling it. So Uh, this episode, just overall thoughts right away. I think this is one of those ones that just makes you love the Pit even more. We get a lot more character development in this episode that we didn't really get in season two, episode one, which was last week on January 8th. And I think, as we progress throughout the season, we're going to get a lot more of these interpersonal relationships. And I think that there are some conflicts that need to be resolved, obviously, because Langdon's back, because Robby's going on a sabbatical. You've got Al-Hashimi, who stepped in and is now becoming what Robby currently is he's kind of the director on that floor. And once Robby leaves for that sabbatical, Al-Hashimi is going to step into his place. So he will be the director, or she will be the director in charge while Robby is gone. So you're seeing her try to navigate building those relationships with the people that she's going to be working with for the next 3 months plus that Robby will be gone, but also trying to, put her fingerprints on what's happening in the Pit. And I think that you see a really nice balance of how she's trying to manage that relationship with Robby and not try to overstep everything that he's done, because obviously the Pit has I think that we see is the Pit has been successful. I think Robby, we can say, has built a very good team. He's got a team that is empathetic. He's got a team that they work together very well. And all the characters, besides Langdon's drug addiction, we really don't really have a bad fruit in the basket, because I just feel like everybody is um, the way they work together. It's very cohesive. While there might be some disagreements, we are now 17 episodes into this show in total, and while there are still some conflicts that need to be resolved, they're not conflicts that are really changing the way that people work and how they function to be able to do their jobs. Obviously, there's some stress with that, but we do get some resolution in this episode. We get a discussion between Mel and Langdon, which I think we really needed as an audience, because their relationship, and if you can't remember, like, I found great reels on TikTok and on YouTube of just the dynamic between Langford and Dr. King, and their relationship is up there with, like, I trying to compare it to other shows. I mean, it's very Dustin and Steve of Stranger Things. It just has a really nice, comfortable feel. They bounce off of each other very well. Mel obviously is on the spectrum, and Langford, I think, really hadn't dealt much with people on the spectrum in his life. But as he started to get in the medical profession, you're going to see a lot more people on the spectrum when you're dealing in medicine. And I think that the way that they build those two out to be very much a kind of older brother, younger sister kind of feel to it. I feel like that's the direction in which the show has started to take. I know a lot of people think that maybe a romantic relationship at some point might be in the cards, but Langford's married. He wears a ring, which I just noticed in this 17th episode, because again, I think we're going to get more and more of Langdon's character building this season, and I think Frank's going to really grow as a person. Now, I don't know if that means that, like, as he grows, maybe divorce is down the road. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't we don't know a whole lot about Dr. Langdon's outside of the hospital relationships and different things like that. So maybe we see some changes there. But again, I think the relationship that they're really building on here is more of that older brother, younger sister, somebody that who's had to take care of her sister throughout her life as a young adult and now an adult, because of the absence of her parents. She's really felt like she's had to take care of her sister, and I think she's taken ownership almost like a parental unit when it comes to taking care of her sister, who is also on the spectrum. And Langdon's trying to, I think, guide her. So Mel, I think Mel, towards kind of leans towards him and really relies on him and trust him because she can trust him, and I think she has a hard time trusting people, and I think that's what we see throughout, season 2, episode 2 is that, she's had a difficult time with this deposition because she feel like she's being betrayed by her patients and that they don't respect her and show the kind of compassion and empathy that she does for everybody else, and it's kind of thrown her because she just, I think, is a person that expects the good in the world to come out, and so much of the evil is coming out, and that's something that I think she's dealing with this deposition. But we launch into the episode. We've got really interesting dynamics. We left on that season 1, or sorry, we left on that episode 1 cliffhanger with the baby that was left in the bathroom, and Al-Hashimi is getting the blood work back, and she says, what's going on with this child? Like, we've got to figure it out. And as she gets the blood work back, there's that pause where they're like, Dr. Al-Hashimi, Dr. Al, what are we doing? Like, what's the drill here? Like, how are we dealing with this? And there's some inconsistencies in the blood work. There's some of the issues. They're trying to get a urine sample at some point throughout the episode. And I didn't know this. There's some kind of way that you can massage an infant's like almost like intestine or whatever and get it to go to the restroom when it needs to, which was wild. Like, you just learn all sorts of different things. I've learned so much about it. There was a lot of intestine talk and the showing of an erectile object later on in the episode that we'll talk about. So we got very medical in this episode. There was a lot of blood, guts, gore. There were some really nasty things that we saw as far as a certain cast that was removed. So once we get to that, I'll kind of give you the warning. But right away, we're starting out with that cliffhanger. But the baby seems to be uh, in good health, good enough health. Like, I think that the baby's fine. Obviously, they're running through different tests and different things like that. I don't think we really get much of a conclusion on the baby's status as of yet, but nothing too crazy has happened from what I've gathered just based off of what they're talking about. They're trying to run different tests. They're not really seeing huge red flags of this baby being unhealthy. And then at one point they say, should we contact social services and like, what's up? What's the next step? And they allude to the fact that putting them in an adoption center or, calling the police might be the next best thing to start to get this process underway of the child going into the system. And then they'll figure out, I'm sure, from there, whether it's adoption agency or whether the child goes to a foster home or whatever it might be. But it does seem like that is coming to an end. It's kind of wrapping up. I don't think we really get, like, we kind of get this idea of like maybe Al-Hashimi being very empathetic because there's an allusion to the fact that Dr. Robby says that there's a lot of mention of empath and empathy, and like his team is very empathetic to the things going on, which I 100% agree with. I think the one person that we really don't see a whole lot of empathy yet, and I think it's because one, she's young, she's trying to prove herself, but she's also one of the and there's people that just don't wear that on their sleeve, where their emotions are on their sleeve, where she's showing a lot of empathy. I think Javadi does have moments where she's empathetic, obviously, but she's not outwardly explaining. We see Langdon explaining his drug addiction. We see Mel very in tune with what her emotions are. Santos is very guarded, but I think we understand why, and she has been pretty upfront with that. And I think in her joking and her talking about the different harsh things that she's been through, I think she's able to do that. Dr. McKay, I think, is very vulnerable in the way that she can open up about her feelings and what's going on with her patients, and how she's empathetic with I think it's Mr. Williams is the guy that's struggling with something with whether it's a tumor in the brain. We haven't quite figured out why he's very bipolar in the way that he's acting. Like, he's all over the place. He's very happy, very angry, very empathetic, very where he's almost gets violent with that patient from season 2, episode 1. We haven't really got any clarity there. He is going in for like different, and he's claustrophobic. He's going in for different like CT scans, and like they're trying to figure out, is there something wrong with this person, where it might be a brain thing. So we do get some progression into that patient. But again, as patients are concerned, really, we're kind of in between a lot of these. We've got the patient that does have dementia or Alzheimer's, and Alzheimer's is extremely tough to deal with if anybody's ever dealt with it personally. Personally, I have two grandmothers that have dementia or have gone through stages of dementia, not necessarily Alzheimer's, but very to the point where like they're not remembering what's going on in the current day. It's recollection of the past. Like my grandmother that just passed away last year dealt with dementia, and it's a nasty thing. I mean, it's erasure of the memories and things that have happened, usually recently, and they do recall, which is wild. They'll recall things from, I mean, the last conversation I ever had with her, she was recalling things that happened to me back in like 2015, 2016, but couldn't remember current day things. Even at times, because she would hear my voice, she would think I was my dad. But we see that really play out here in this episode. But before we get into all of that, that was just kind of where we are with the patients. Al Hashimi, the reason why I really wanted to bring this up is Al Hashimi really they're kind of playing her as this a little bit cold, a little bit standoffish, uh, type A, very black and white, very by the numbers kind of person, using the research, using the newest technology, very cutting edge, very advanced in what she thinks to a fault. I think she tries to, and there's this is something that comes up as a reoccurring theme in this episode, is this tradition versus innovation, this battle of gut versus brain, of heart versus brain, which is something I think everybody is different in the way that they interact with people, interact with their job, their coworkers, their colleagues. It's what makes us very cool as a human race. Everybody's different. Sorry, nobody is exactly the same. Everybody deals with things differently. Everybody has different mechanisms in which they deal with trauma and um, different opinions about. It's what's cool about about this world is that we can have differing opinions. I think unfortunately the evil in human is, if your opinion is not like somebody else's, it means you have to try to impose that upon somebody else, which in the pit, it's not really something that they're trying to do. It's a very interesting dynamic between Al Hashimi and Dr. Robbie. Um, I'm interested to see how this relationship progresses. I said this last episode because Dr. Al-Hashimi, from the get-go, with dealing with this baby, doesn't seem to really connect empathetically and think, at least out loud, or discuss out loud what she's feeling. But there's definitely something there because that's what that cliffhanger was meant to do. She does have feeling. There is something behind the curtain. There is something behind the hardened mask that she has put on, I think, to deal with healthcare. And I think that's what a lot of healthcare professionals do. And that's a way of coping and getting through a lot of what they have to deal with in their day to day, is to put on this stoic face when it's got to be hard on the psyche to continue on with life acting like it's normal when everything you're dealing with is very not normal, and oftentimes against the norms of what you think should happen or should be happening. And I think that's so eloquently put when you think about the way that they've developed these characters now going forward. You see a lot of discussions with different team members on the staff. um, I think most of them have an interaction where, and I think they do this really well, in the pit, where when they're trying to show the parallels between two characters, for instance, in this episode, Robbie and Al Hashimi, you see a lot of times where they're together, where uh, maybe Whitaker or Javati or Santos. There's a moment with Santos and there's a moment with McKay where uh, Robbie and Al Hashimi are standing there talking to them, and there's that interaction because it's showing how Al Hashimi approaches talking to her team, and Robbie talks to his team. and while very different in what they might believe, are very similar in the way that they're both very good at listening to what their team needs, but approaching it from different ways that necessarily they don't necessarily agree with 100% in the style that they approach their team members with. So obviously, Dr. Al-Hashimi is going to provide substantial evidence, research, very methodical, clinical, very thought out, step by step processes. Whereas Robbie's going to interact more with his team member about, well, what do you feel like? What have you done in the past that you feel like this is the way that we approach this? This is the way that we approach this. And sometimes that can get you into trouble, but also sometimes the book to book, or the rule by rule, step by step kind of process that you take, that Al Hashimi oftentimes takes, that black and white method is very difficult at times too, because you're not really listening to people. You're just kind of going through the motions as you're going through these different things. So it's an interesting theme that we'll continue to monitor. And uh, one thing that I noticed, and I don't know if anybody, like, I'm sure other people have noticed this, obviously, but one thing I caught that I was like, whoa, that's weird, because I put these two things. I said Dr. Al Hashimi is a firm believer in AI. Dr. Al, so Al looks like AI when you put it in capital letters on like a Word document, because I have it typed out. It says Al AI. It's exactly this. It looks the same. So I wonder if that was intentional. Obviously, I know they're going for, a lot of doctors are from different diverse backgrounds. I think she at one point says that she's Persian. I don't want to try to attempt to guess at what language they speak, because they do start speaking it. And then Dr. Ogilvy, who is a white man, starts to speak in that language. And she goes, "Oh, I didn't know you were Persian." And he goes, "No, I'm not. I think he said I've dated somebody that was, and there was a language barrier, so I had to learn certain words." Which was a great, great way to introduce the fact that she's Persian, that she's from that area, and that, like, this is what she believes in, and she's got different beliefs based off of where she comes from, but that doesn't make her any less of a human being. It was very cool, like the way that they set that up, and then the fact that the very white vanilla guy was the one that ended up speaking a language that not many know, I think, unless you're Persian. So a very cool moment, and something that I really enjoy in this show is that they're able to do these so subtly, that they bring in the character's background, where they come from, their values, their beliefs, their religion, without actually just explicitly stating it. And I love that, because it gives the audience the ability to put those context clues together of, like, here's who this person is, here's where they come from, here's what they might believe in, here's that religion they might believe in, just based off of where they're from, what background they've come from. And it's not dumbing it down for the audience. I don't like when shows do that, where they think that we as the audience are dumb, so they just need to explain it flat out what that means. I just love that writing, because it is such great writing. It's intelligent, and it allows us as the audience to go, man, we're pretty smart for catching on to that kind of stuff. So that is something I think the Pitt does extremely well. Authority in Crisis. I think you're starting to see the way that Robbie, based off of the dislocated shoulder, what they should do. Dr. Robbie is basically giving Mel, which is really funny to watch, because Mel, being on the spectrum, she has moments where she questions things, but she'll just do as she's told. She's very, what would you call that? She follows orders directly and to a T. She will do what you say. She will do what you ask, and she doesn't really push back on what you've said or asked. She'll state her opinions, just because I think sometimes the social cues aren't there, where she just states the truth, and sometimes that can be really hard to hear for a lot of people, but she ends up just saying them anyway. And it's funny, because when they're in there trying to get that shoulder back in place, which is one of the most gruesome things I think they've shown on the Pit, because she, like, sticks her finger into the bottom, and I've never seen anybody dislocate the shoulder and pop it out of place, breaking it, and also it coming out of, like, a compound fracture, where it comes out of the skin and there's bone, and they have to, like, shove the bone back into the armpit up underneath the shoulder. It was disgusting. I was like, oh gosh. There were two things in this episode that I was like, oh goodness. And that was definitely one of them. But yeah, I think the way you see Dr. Robby exist in that moment, and then Dr. Al-Hashimi exists in that moment. Al-Hashimi is providing, hey, this is what you should do. Here's by the book of what we normally do. Here's what the research states. Here's what AI would state. Here's what I think we should do, presenting all the states and facts. But in that situation, because Robbie's been in trauma centers where Al-Hashimi does not work in trauma, it's very different in the way that he just says, you got to react. And I totally agree with him on that. I think on that aspect in the ER, when you're dealing with trauma, you don't have a lot of time to think, what should we do next? Because that can be, those seconds can be life and death. Like making that decision in that moment could save somebody's life. And I think when you're a pit doctor, when you're in the ER, when you're in the ICU, when you're a surgeon, I think those split second decisions, especially intensive care, you got to make those. And most of that's trusting your gut and what you know, rather than thinking about what would the textbook want me to do. Because again, not everything's textbook that they are dealing with. Everybody's different. Everybody's body is different. The way that they deal with pain or the way that the body might be set up is different. So you don't know if you're hurting someone, or that guy could have had issues with all sorts of different things that we didn't know about. And if they wait too long, there might be issues. But also, then there's the flip opposite. I can see Al-Hashimi side of, like, if you just go on gut all the time, you're liable to screw something up somewhere, and that's why you get sued. And this brings me to the next situation I really wanted to get into is Dr. Mel King is dealing with the deposition. We hear her talk about it in episode 1 of the season. This continues on into season 2, episode 2, and will continue on, I think, throughout the episode, obviously, because it is a 15-hour shift. So it's not just going to get away. I think we'll see her in the room with lawyers and talking about it. I'm assuming it's not going to go well because she doesn't do well with social interaction as well as some of these other doctors might. She tends to get very anxious, and she is anxious still. She's very anxious. It's on her mind. It's all she can really think about. And they did a really nice job picking Mel for this type of situation, because anybody else, like Santos, I think, like she said in episode 1, I've been sued like 2 or 3 times and nothing happens. Like, we're attendings, they can't get to us. So we're protected by the hospital. Residents, attendings, we're protected by all sorts of different things. So they can't really get to us. They'll sue us, and the hospital might have to pay for a settlement, but they're never going to get to us unless it's malpractice. So like, it shows that if you pick any of these characters, like Whitaker might have been a good one, but I think you really needed Whitaker with the med students, because I don't know how that works with Mel. They did a great job this season picking Mel for this deposition. And it's funny because Robbie's like, well, I've been sued 4 times in this moment. And Al-Hashimi, he goes, how many times have you, Dr. Al, like, because they know something wrong is going on with Mel. How many times have you been sued? And Mel's watching her, and she goes, well, I have never been sued. And then Mel's like, dude, you just said it was normal. Robbie, you just said everybody gets sued, and here's somebody that's never been sued. And that sets up a lot of good conversation between Robbie and Al-Hashimi going forward. But it also shows, and it kind of sets up our stakes, right? It is showing us that Dr. Robbie, who is someone that interacts with his patients based on his gut and his knowledge from previous experiences. Then you got Dr. Al-Hashimi, who's never really interacted on gut and has always had a game plan for what was next, has never faced a lawsuit because she does everything by the book. It would be interesting to hear and maybe we do see this, and we've seen a little bit because Dr. Robbie says that I've been in trauma centers, have you? And she goes, well, no. So we know that Dr. Robbie has seen a lot more, I think, than Dr. Al-Hashimi as far as trauma is concerned. I don't know what their numbers would look like as far as saving lives, and you might not ever know that because you don't know if something you did saved somebody's life necessarily all the time. But again, you do know the death numbers and the death toll and how many patients have died at the hands of certain physicians or doctors. And, that's not their fault. But again, things happen. I just think it would be interesting to kind of hear that comparison, because I do wonder if there is a difference between, Dr. Robbie's methods and the outcomes for patients, and then Dr. Al-Hashimi's, like, who's had a more and obviously you don't have to do that all the time, but you have different success rates for different doctors, obviously, of patients that are discharged and when they're discharged. You could probably look at those numbers, but you don't ever really get that. You just get more of this comparison of like, I've been sued 4 times and I've been sued none. So we will see how that all unfolds. But throughout this episode, how it really does unfold is the fact that like Robby is always when the two of them are walking around and kind of doing their rounds to check on everybody, their attendings or the residents and the med students. They're interacting with each of our characters, which is great because you see the dynamics between all of them, and then they always have questions for Robby or Al-Hashimi, and every single time you see that parallel of like gut versus you know brains, and it's a fascinating dynamic that they're really building on. With Mel, she is struggling with his deposition, and then she goes to take care of the patient that has come in and is dealing with like different cuts and bruises, has fallen down. I forget exactly what he complains about his pain being, but she's sitting there and due to her inability, I think, to acknowledge like what he is saying, this patient's basically hitting on Mel and then is asking her like, "What do you like to do outside of work?" And she was like, "Well, I take care of my sister." And he goes, "No, no, no. Like, what do you like to do outside of work? Like, what are some things you like to do?" And she's not quite catching like why he keeps asking that. And he's just like, I don't know. She's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I just do what I like to do. Like, stop asking me that. Like, I don't understand. Um, and then police come into the pit, and once this patient recognizes that um, that they're in there for him, he takes off running and knocks Mel off the stool that she's sitting on. She goes back and she hits her head on the floor, and it cuts to a scene transition. So we assume she's hurt. We don't know the severity of her injury. It didn't look too serious, but it was like, oh shoot, like knocked Mel out. At worst, it looked like a concussion or you cut your head open kind of thing. But it could have been worse, right? It could have been a lot worse. You get a brain bleed and stuff like that. But it didn't look like it was like huge because like blood wasn't pouring out of her head. It just to sort of go back and whack her head on the floor. So we assumed that she was going to be injured somewhat, but this guy takes off running. The police take off after him, and it cuts scene. And then I think that is when we start to see other things happening in the pit. But Dr. Mel is then we'll continue with Mel and then we'll kind of move on to other characters throughout the episode because it does a good job of jumping around to the different characters, but it's kind of hard to summarize all that by going scene by scene because it jumps around so much. But then we see Mel behind the nurse's station. Dana's got an ice pack on her head. They're sitting there, and then Dr. Langdon rounds the corner and he's like, "Oh my gosh, are you all right? Like, what's going on?" And they explain the situation, and he makes a joke. She doesn't quite understand it. She's like, "We'll send her to the burrows." And then she's like, "What are you talking about? Like, what's going on? Like, you're treating me? What?" And then he makes a joke. She doesn't catch on to it, and they're kind of like, "He's joking with you." And then he's like, "Yeah, it was just a joke." And she's like, "Oh, I guess I didn't catch on to it." And you just see that funny quirkiness of Mel not quite catching jokes and catching the social cues, but Langdon clearly has strong feelings of friendship, and he really cares about her, and that was built into season 1, and now it's continuing through season 2 because Langdon had multiple hours or episodes where he wasn't really around the pit because of the drug addiction and Robby suspending him. But now we're seeing that relation start to pick back up where it was. He takes a moment to take Mel back into one of the, I guess it would be the triage areas, but one of like the makeshift rooms. And he sits her on a bed, and the police come in and they're like, "Hey, did you get a good look at this guy? Like, what's going on?" And you can tell she's really nervous. And then they start talking about the process. And this is really interesting how they did this. Again, great parallel here of like what she's going through. But this situation, it ends up being like, hey, if we catch this person, If you do remember anything that he looks like, or any kind of tells, like what his weight or his height is, or anything that you can give us. Once we catch the guy, we'll probably have to bring you into court so you can testify, identify the person that, because he robbed I think it was a liquor store or a gas station, and you're going to have to point him out in a lineup, and then also testify against this person. There will be lawyers present. You'll have to give your statement. And she said, lawyers, in front of a judge, like, I'm gonna. So she's already having that anxiety over the deposition that she's going through. Now she's got this added pressure of, she didn't do anything wrong with this patient, but she's afraid. That anxiety, that fear is there from the mentions of lawyers, the mentions of a court case, the mentions of having to go above or before a judge. She's anxious about it, and so she's trying to tell herself that she is fine. But Dr. Langdon does a great job of, he takes the policeman out of the room. I don't think, from what I remember, I've got the episode right here. I'm kind of going through, like, I always have it on the background so I kind of understand where maybe things go from here. Oh yeah. No, I don't think we don't ever get like an explanation as to, like, I don't think we ever see him talking to the cops, but I'm assuming what he's doing, because she's very anxious and the police are kind of like, what's going on? Like, why is she being strange? Did she hit her head too hard? I think Langdon removes them from the room because he wants to explain to them that she is on the spectrum, that she is dealing with a lot, that she's got a lot of anxiety, and maybe that's not why they're getting the whole truth right now, and that you might have to come back when she's less rattled, because I think he identifies that there is a lot of anxiety, and they're like, why are you not being truthful with us? Like, what did you do? And he's got to be like, okay, hold on, like, she's dealing with stuff, she's going through things, and clearly there's a different way to approach Mel that Langdon is very aware of, and I think he's trying to explain how to do that with the police so that they can get the truth out of her and get a good explanation. But as he's stepping out, this is brilliant, great callback to season 1. Mel at one point says that people on the spectrum, because they had a patient that was on the spectrum, she's also talking about her sister, where sounds and the ongoings of the NER and just the movement and everything the lighting can be very overstimulating to those on the spectrum. And as she explained that, Langdon is listening and they're sitting on the floor. It's a great scene in season 1. But as he's stepping out in this episode in season 2, he turns off the lights, he closes the door, he even offers to pull kind of the shade so that she can't really see the lights on the outside. But he goes, I'm gonna let you just kind of sit in here for the moment, I'll turn the lights out for you. He clearly had picked up on the fact that, like, she was also talking about herself, where she struggles when she gets very anxious and she gets very, like, aware of what's going on, like, and she really starts to have a panic attack or has anxiety. She can calm herself by removing herself from this situation that is overstimulating. And he picked up on that. So he made it to give her an environment which she could exist in, that was comfortable, that was calm, so she could get herself gathered again. And it was beautiful. Like, it was a great, it didn't take this huge explanation. It didn't take much for Langdon to even do this. Just turns out the lights, shuts the door, and says, I'll let you have your moment in here, in the quiet, in the dark, and to remove the sound. And it was great. I thought it was a really nice touch to what their relationships is. We don't see Langdon interacting with Louis, which is a whole lot, which is our alcoholic that is our frequent flyer, who is in this episode a lot. Dr. Whitaker is currently with the med students taking care of our patient with Alzheimer's and the death of her husband. And Dr. Whitaker is also taking care of Louis and draining his stomach of the excess fluid that is in his stomach. I think it's like 5 liters that they end up having to drain. But that's where we catch up with Whitaker. Whitaker is doing that. He's teaching the med students how to interact with these patients, and he's teaching by example. A lot of times he's not really asking them a whole lot. He's doing, and then he's like, all right, do you have any questions? Like, or he'll be like, what's next? Like, what should I do next? which is a great way to teach. You can tell Whitaker has taken on that persona that Robby had, where Robby in a teaching hospital is very open to letting his patient, or sorry, his students, his colleagues really learn from doing. And Whitaker, same thing. He shows them and then he kind of lets them do. And I really enjoy that. I think he's a great leader. I will say, like his bedside manner is kind of awkward and clunky, but he's very genuine in what he is doing. He wants to do exactly as Robby does. You can see him being very empathetic. He tries to make the patients feel as if he truly does, and he does. He truly does care about his patients, and I think you can see that in the way that he cares for them as if they are his own family. And we start out with the Alzheimer's patient. That Alzheimer's patient is still not sure that her husband died, so he's like, I need to tell her that her husband died. And we get multiple scenes of Whitaker along with Ogilvy and Kwan talking to this patient about the fact that, hey, um, your husband has died. And she keeps saying, I think it's his name's Joey. And she just keeps saying, no, not my Joey. And he's like, it's horrible because like he tells her one time and then she goes, wait, what are you guys doing here? And he goes, oh, well, I was here to tell you that you're about your husband. And she goes, oh, is he here? And it's like within 10 seconds of when he just told her that he had died. And he's like, oh, like she's just not, she's never going to be able to grasp this. And then they switch to the other room where he does have moments where he's taking care of other patients. He's rounding with the students. He's going to other different doctors and talking to them. He's trying to, again, Whitaker is very much trying to navigate through his second year, and he's very smart. He's given a lot of responsibility. He's now the teacher. And I think that the different things that he's doing are very Robby. I mean, you see a lot of Robby in him. So again, I think a really good character building episode for Whitaker, because he's having to do different things to teach these other students. And what you start to see is Ogilvy and Kwan becoming more confident in what they're doing. And as we get further and further in the episode, they go into a room with the patient with Alzheimer's. They show that the husband is dead. He's laying on the bed, and it's really sad because the lady goes in and she just starts talking to her husband as if he's alive, and then hugs him. And she's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you laying so still? She's not getting, and he's like, oh my gosh, she still doesn't get it. Like, and she will never get it. And he's trying to mentally build through that of like, this is awful. Like, and I can't imagine, me personally, I can't imagine people in this situation where you're a doctor and you have a patient that passed, and then you're dealing with maybe a partner or spouse or whatever it might be, where they can't fathom their partner being dead. One, but also if a patient's spouse has Alzheimer's and you're telling them that they have passed, and then they're just reliving that horrible feeling over and over and over. And I think as Whitaker takes the patient in to see her husband that's passed, who has Alzheimer's, he's like, I guess I just can't keep doing this. Like, this is hard on her and me. Like, I'm having to bring her in, and now has been told 4 or 5 times that her husband's dead, and then relapses and has that same exact experience over and over again. Like, that would be like us forgetting and then having to relive another death over and over and over again. It's just horrible. Like, nobody should ever have to go through that. And Alzheimer's is an awful thing. And it's evil. It does not know any boundaries, and it will take down anybody. And it's an awful thing. And I think that's what you see Whitaker really struggling with, is that like, this is a horrible, horrible disease, and there's really not much that we can really do about it. So then we get Santos, who is still taking care of our patient, that is the young girl. I think she's 11 or 12, and they're still not sure what's going on. And we don't get a conclusion on that at all. We don't even really get more of a progression. We get more of Robby talking to her, and when Santos is talking to Al-Hashimi before with Robby, and she's like, does she always jump to conclusions? And he's like, well, no, like that's not typically. And the social worker says the same thing about to Al-Hashimi and Robby. Was like, does this doctor always jump to conclusions? And they're like, no. Um, but there is still concern that this kid might still be being abused, and they just don't know. But they're still not sure, because every time they talk to her, it's a positive experience with her father. The girlfriend, same kind of thing. Like there's nothing that's come out yet that would make us believe that the child is being abused, except for the fact that she has bruises and is bleeding and stuff like that. So it's very confusing. It's very hard, I think, for Santos, and Robby just kind of like, trust your gut. Like he goes, I personally, now that you say that, I believe that she might be being abused, but I don't like. We got to dig more. We got to keep digging to figure it out. I was thinking about this because it was like, well, getting into predictions of what's coming. Just kind of spoiler, because I'll at the end of the episode I'll tell you what I think season 3 might be, or some things that might be happening as we're setting up for season 3 and beyond, or sorry, episode 3 and beyond. Uh, One thing that I started to think of, like, you know, there are times where people present being abused, but there's not proof enough to say that maybe she's being physically abused, but not sexually abused. But we can't prove that, because nothing, she just has these bruises, she's just bleeding, but we can't actually prove that her father is beating her. That's where I'm starting to lean towards, like, maybe that's where we're at, right? Because this show does a really nice job of showing different cases that don't always end in mostly don't end in happy endings. But this would be like one of those situations that is so real in what we deal with. I think, at least the medical professionals deal with, is that all the signs are there, but you can't prove it. So there's nothing you can do about it. And that feels like what this actually might be heading more toward, because I just can't, like, I've heard multiple people that were doctors that have broken down this as doctors who watch the Pit, and they're like, I mean, it screams abuse, but it also could be like some kind of rare blood thing. But also, like, there are instances where somebody's being abused. We can't prove it, so there's nothing we can do about it, but just take care of this person and get her injuries healed. Uh, but yeah, that's where we see um, a lot of what is going on um, with our med students, with Mel, with Santos, because they kind of round and do different things there. But mostly that the child really focuses on Santos, because Santos is trying to figure out what's going on. Dr. McKay, again, still dealing with the patient that had just kind of really uh, bipolar type interactions and reactions, sorry, to what his treatment was. Like, he had the hurt wrist, she grabs it, he's like, get off me, don't touch me. And then very violent, and then all of a sudden he'd be very happy-go-lucky. And then this episode he's going to get a CT, and he's talking about that. And so we don't see a whole lot of progression with that particular patient, but I think we're going to be coming on to next episode or the following that we get to start to really see maybe what's going on, because he's going for that head scan. And I think that he might be dealing with some of that, or some kind of mental challenge, because he mentions that he's claustrophobic and he doesn't like the idea of an MRI, but she goes, no, it's a CT. It's like a half donut, so you could move if you really needed to. But yeah. Another thing that we see is our nurse, Emma, and Dana. They're still taking care of the guy, that the unhomed person that comes in, and they're removing his cast, and he hadn't had a bath for a long time. Hygiene not really a thing, and he says that his cast is kind of itchy, and they're like, okay, well, we're going to remove the cast and kind of clean out underneath it. So you're just setting this up, and it's like, this is going to be gross. Something's going to be gross. Like, it's going to be mold, like, on him, or like rats or cockroaches, or something's in there. Something is in there. Something is alive in there, or like this. It's going to be so gross that they're going to have to amputate his arm or something. Like, you're expecting the worst, and then they open this cast. I think it's Dr. Mohan. I think Javadi's there, Dana and Emma, and they open this cast because they're trying to teach Emma how to cut a cast, because you got to be careful when you're cutting a cast. So Dr. Moen is trying to be like, hey, this is how you cut it. It's very light. You don't try to cut into it because you cut the arm off or slice the arm. But she's doing it, and then they get that thing open, and they're like, well, expect the worst. And sure enough, they open it. It's all scabbed up and all this gross, like yellow, like just ugh. And then on it, like I'm talking, I think they're like probably 30 to 50 maggots on his arm. And they interviewed the cast of this. They go, what's your least favorite thing of the season that you had to film? Because it's a very gruesome show. And they're like, oh, 100%. Like every single one of them, I think, said, oh, 100% the maggots, because they were everywhere. Like when they were shooting it, they're real maggots. They're pouring this on his arm. But maggots move, so they're like all over the ground, and like they said, it was gross. Like it was disgusting because they're all there, right? Because they're all filming in that same location. It's not like they're film day here, film day there. Like all the cast is there, so they're seeing all this being filmed, and like it's gross. It was disgusting. If you don't like maggots, blech, like it was a tough watch. That one was tough. Like there's a lot of gruesome moments in the pit, but man, that one was just disgusting. Like it had gotten so bad that like maggots were born there. Like it's so gross. Like it's just disgusting. Like it was like perfect environment for maggots to thrive. And when you think about places where maggots survive and thrive, dumpsters. Like that's what it was like. It was like opening this cast of it was gross. But very realistic. Like this could happen. Like this is stuff that happens. Yeah, it was disgusting. One of the most disgusting things of the show, I think. So that was rough. What else? We get some mention of AI in this episode as well. So Al-Hashimi has pulled in all of pretty much everyone. They have, I think it's Whitaker, Ogilvy, Kwan, Santos, McKay, anybody that you could find. I think the only person that was not there, I don't think the nurses were there. Robby was not there. I can't remember if Langdon was there, but I feel like he was. I feel like everybody was kind of pulled into this situation. And Al-Hashimi is showing them this new app where AI is listening to the patient talk. And I think it was one of our special needs. I think it was this. Yes, it was. It was a patient comes in that was special needs that had, I can't remember exactly what it was, but was talking and they were recording it and into the phone, into this app, and it was taking down and making notes. So doctors on shifts, I think they said 48% of the time or 40% of the time is spent taking notes and like writing them down, jotting them down. They also have this thing that they talk into at computers where they'll talk into and verbalize their notes. But notes and providing evidence and providing all these statements and things like that is you have to do it as a physician. You have to take notes. You have to identify these things. You have to go in and take the time to sit down and write out all of these things that are happening with all your patients. Every single patient you have to write notes for. And it eats up about a majority of their time, like it is mentioned. And Al-Hashimi said that this is a new way that we'll put all these notes together and it'll cut it pretty much your workload in half from taking all these notes and verbalizing them into the computer systems. And it is fascinating. Actually, I think Langdon is in this, or Whitaker, because I can't remember exactly who mentions this, but there's a mention of the AI does an exceptional job. It gets everything that is needed, except it mixes up a couple of the drugs that were supposed to be administered to the patient. And I think it's Langdon or Whitaker that go, it could be Ogilvy or Ogilvy. They say, hey, it said like you said this to give the patient these drugs, but the AI says these drugs, and there are two different ones. And she was like, yes, sometimes that does happen. While it is exceptional at capturing what you're saying, what you're doing, and what you need, it will make mistakes. So you will need to go back and make sure it is all correct. And they were like, oh, okay, well, I mean, that defeat the purpose of it? And she goes, no, but like that's all you're correcting are two things. It's done its job as long as you're reading it and being careful about what you're doing. And that presents such a relevant conversation into the world what we live in today, where AI is such a big thing. We don't, it doesn't belong in creativity. It doesn't belong, but like to cut down on workload, I mean, it's hard to, it really is. It's hard to, I guess, dispel the fact that like AI won't help. Like AI 100% can help in workload. It can help you write things. It can help you digest things, summarize things. It can help you in these situations where it's taking notes for you, but it's not going to be accurate 100% of the time. And a lot of times it's wrong, because it's pulling information from the internet where it thinks it's right, but it's pulling from different sources that are not correct. So there are still a lot of things that are wrong about AI, but there are a lot of things that can be. And so it's a very tough, like, whether you believe in it or not, or want it to come or not, or whatever you believe about it, it's here. It's going to stay. I think as time goes on, it will be improved. Obviously, it has its dangers, it also has its benefits. So it's a very difficult balance, I think, that we are in, much like we are with everything else, like social media, good and bad, pros and cons, weighed, like it's a 50-50 for a lot of it. It is, it's a difficult conversation, and that's why I think it's so cool that they are tackling this, because I can honestly tell you that because of where I work, it is a constant, conversation in the healthcare field of how do we leverage AI, but do it in a way that isn't harming the environment, isn't harming the workforce, making us lazier. Like it is such a difficult balance to try to strike. Um, and I think we're just gonna learn by what we do. Like I think we're just gonna learn as we go, and that's how we always kind of have operated to human beings. Mistakes will happen, bad things will happen because of AI. We'll learn from them, and then I think we try to help to improve the situations. So it'll be very interesting. Al-Hashimi makes some really great points. I mean, this does it easily cuts down 20 to 30 minutes per patient as they're taking notes, just depending on how fast you dictate or how fast you write some of these notes. So again, I think it's a fascinating topic that they're tackling here that is very relevant. What else? Uh Trying to think of anything else that's really, I mean, besides Emma Nolan is learning the hard way, our nurse, following Dana around. Dana's like, she's the old girl on the block, and she knows how to run an ER as the charge nurse. She is brilliant in everything that she does, navigating different relationships that she has with doctors, because a lot of times, as we know, doctors and nurses can have a little bit of a tension filled relationship with one another. But I think through communication, through mutual respect, I think that communication has been key. We've personally, I've seen physician and nurses relationships getting better, and I think that stigma that nurses and docs can't get along, I think there's a lot of myth in that. It's really about communication and how much they respect one another. Um, and I know some doctors that have really great relationships with the nursing staff, and something that they pride themselves on is that communication and respect for one another, because they do a similar job but very different things in what their role requires. Because the nurses are the ones that are at the bedside 100% of the time, or at least within reach, right, of these patients, where the physicians are popping in and out of rooms and see patients every once in a while. So there is a working relationship that needs to happen, and I think that good doctors will have good relationships with nurses. So, and vice versa, and good nurses will have good relationships with doctors. So, again, I think they do a nice job of balancing that out. I think showing just all the grunt work that nurses have to do, dealing with things that you wouldn't expect you'd have to deal with. So, for instance, the last one that really Emma has to deal with, besides the gross maggot and the worms and showering the guy that hasn't showered in years, was a erectile dysfunction, but the opposite. A guy was staying erect and had taken supplements for erectile dysfunction, and could not get that to go down, or the so he was had to have it drained. He had to have the old penis drained. So Emma had to learn to remove blood from the penis, and I didn't know that was the thing. I had no idea that that's how you could do that, but you can, I guess. And but you have to remove quite a bit of blood, as we saw. And Emma was like, "Wait, like more? Like it doesn't just stop. It doesn't go lasted at like the moment you take blood for the first. Nope, you got to keep removing blood from it, and then it will go down." And so again, things that we don't know as the audience that nursing has to go through, and that most of us would not want to go through throughout the day. But it's just part of life there in the healthcare system. So nothing's ever said about it. Nothing's ever really. I will say, I think it was good. Al-Hashimi comes in and she says something about it being erect for a long time or something like that, or getting it to be erect for a long time. And Santos goes, "That's what she said." And Al Hashimi was like, "Really?" Like, she wasn't smiling. She was just like, "Really?" And Santos is kind of like, "Oops, not the right joke." Because Robby probably would have laughed, but um, Al Hashimi did not find the penis joke very funny. So it was a good way to show just how crazy things can get in the ED, no pun intended. But also just like, this is what nurses have to go through, man. Like, they see some crazy stuff in the ER, stuff that you would just not believe in your wildest dreams, and 100% they happen. What else? Langdon admit that he did have a relapse, but then checked himself back in. Not recently, but like through his recovery process, he did have that. Uh, One of the biggest moments is him talking when they're in that moment together, when they're talking about what fears they have going on currently, and he confesses to the fact that, like, while she's scared, he's also scared of what his life was, and how he's trying to mend the fences. And he goes, "I'm sorry if I," because this is their real first face-to-face interaction that they've had since he's been gone. And he takes the moment to say, "I let you down," and Mel goes, "No, you did not let me down," which is a great moment, because I think as a friend, um she could 100% felt betrayed. You know, the fact that he hid this from her, he was going behind her back as well, stealing the drugs, doing it and lying about it, and then also missing shifts to where she probably had to work some extra hours to pick up for his slack when he was gone. So, yeah, he 100% let the team down, and they all do deserve apologies from Langdon, and we're starting to see him make his rounds. I think he's gonna hit every single character at this point, and Robby will probably be the ultimate, the clinical or the climactic point for Langdon this season. Will be his. There's going to be a breakdown of sorts, I think, from Langdon, and the way that he's got to be honest with Robby. There's going to become a moment where they're going to have a big discussion. And that'll probably be later in the season, but I'm looking forward to that, because they've really built this up. I do feel like it's great that the first person he's really had to have a heart to heart with, besides Louis, the patient, is Mel. Like, Mel is his ride or die. So I'm glad that happpened. A couple last things to mention. Ogilvy, who is the doctor, one of the med students that's been going around with Dr. Whitaker, is very, very smart, and will go out of his way to prove how smart he is with Al-Hashimi, speaking with her because she's Persian in their language. And she's like, "Whoa, I'm impressed." But everything that he starts to now do, he's getting more comfortable. He's getting more cocky. He's draining Louis' fluids from his stomach. He even goes kind of insubordinate, and because Robby comes in to check on Whitaker and the med students of Louis, and Whitaker says, with the clear liquid that we're draining, there's not really any signs of concern there. If it was more of like tinted, clouded, or got blood in it, then that's when the issue would be. Or he doesn't mention the blood, but then Ogilvy oversteps his, I guess, mentor teacher, his attending or resident, I think they're called, but he oversteps and he tells Robby, well, what Whitaker failed to mention is if there's blood and clouding, that's also a big red sign or red flag. And Whitaker kind of looks at him like, "Dude," and Robbie's like, "Yeah, I mean, that's correct, but that was kind of weird." So you can tell there's going to become a point where he starts to rub people the wrong way. He's already rubbed Javati the wrong way. Javati is we get allusion to the fact that she's turning 21 because the nurses are planning a 21st birthday party for her. I think it's Precious and oh goodness, what's her name? Oh man, or not Precious, Princess and shoot, forget her name. The other nurse on staff, can't remember, but they're having a conversation about Javati's 21st birthday. So Javati's 21. She's like this prodigy, this genius. She's supposed to be a genius, and Ogilvy can match her intelligence. And I think it's Santos and Whitaker are joking at some point that like you're a little bit afraid that there's somebody else that's just as intelligent as you, and but they're more vocal than you, and they're kind of joking with her, but she's taking it like, yeah, like this person's on my territory. And then there becomes a moment where they mention that Javati's competition will be Ogilvy and Kwan. Like, and if you don't really think about it, but like most hospitals as a med student, then you become residents or attendings, and then like there's competition. They only have certain spots they can fill, and then you got to move on to another hospital. And they might be competing for the same spot in that hospital. There might be one spot for Javati or Ogilvy, and they're competing for the same spot. So Javati's got to prove her worth. And so now we're starting to see that dynamic where Ogilvy and Javati are going head to head with their intelligence. Um, and that's going to get very interesting because Ogilvy has made some kind of weird side jokes and remarks. He's kind of not very likable. They're kind of setting him up as more antagonistic to what Javati's doing, but also some of the other staff. So that seems to be the direction in which they're heading with Javati. We do get a little bit. Moan's mom calls again, and there's more angst there. But there's not really like she doesn't have a whole lot going on yet. Like Moan, not a whole lot as far as like what she's dealing with personally. And also, I will say they are starting to kind of put some characters into the background where Garcia is also not really prevalent right now in this season. So I'll be interested to see what happens. They brought in a new character with the social worker, which was different from I think they said that they picked up our shift from the last time. But our our social worker is in, I can't remember his name, and on IMDb he's not identifying him. But we do get a new social worker, and he's kind of a non-factor to me so far. Like he's just not had a whole lot to do, and he's not giving people a hard time. There is an instance where, what is her name? Hold on, I'm trying to scroll through my notes, sorry, to figure out her name. I know her first name is Noelle. She is a doctor on a different floor. I cannot find her name. Noelle something. Sorry, I lost her name. I had it in my notes. But anyway, Noelle Hastings. She is, sorry, not a doctor. She's a nurse from the trauma center, but she's on a different floor, so we don't see her. She does interact with Dana. Very interesting. No, she's in quality, so she's in charge of finding out the different things that are going on in the hospital that there might be concerns about, and she's talking to Robby about certain things that could be, they've got a discharge for certain patients because they're insurance patients that come in. I think it's the guy maybe with the arm. Yeah, I think it's the guy with a dislocated shoulder. He can't be taken care of at the Pitt or like the trauma center because his insurance doesn't cover him there. It was very interesting. I'm interested to see where that storyline goes because it kind of felt like there was something else that she wasn't mentioning, that like he either doesn't have insurance or maybe there's some issues with paperwork or legal or whatever it might be. But it was very weird. But anyway, Noelle Hastings is she is a nurse, but she works in quality and she is in charge of making sure the hospital is living up to its standards and following all the rules that they're supposed to be following so that they don't get lawsuits hit on them. And speaking of hit on, it appears that Noelle and Robby are more than friends. Seems like they've had a romantic past. So maybe this is because there is a interview out there where Noah Wiley's asked about if Robby was going to have a romantic interest this year, and he kind of played it like probably not, but yes, maybe, like, sort of. And I think this is what he's alluding to, is the fact that, like, I think Noelle Hastings and him have gone out a couple times maybe, or maybe they've slept together. It definitely felt more romantically charged, where a lot of people were thinking that Al-Hashimi and Robby were gonna get together, but as I talked about last episode, I was like, "That's a really quick turnaround for someone to come in who's gonna be your replacement, and in 15 hours, you're gonna become romantically charged with one another," especially when you start out on totally different ends of the opinion spectrums. So again, I don't see it happening, Al Hashimi and Robby, but I do think this Noelle Hastings character, maybe this is where we see some romantic feelings from Robby. So that'll be interesting to watch. Thinking about the episode overall, I love this episode. I thought it was a great episode. The patients once again are phenomenal. The one I just kind of missed, kind of going back through my notes, just one last mention. I think it's Sister Grace. It's the nun that has come in who has gonorrhea in the eye. They were like, well, she can't be sexually active. She's a nun. So how did she get this? And it was from just the fact that she is giving her time to, I think, a shelter somewhere, and she volunteers on the weekends and was doing the bed sheets, and they're not necessarily the most clean bed sheets, and you can get all sorts of different human matter on there, and she maybe had touched a sheet and then like touched her eye, and that's how she got it, which checks out. Like, obviously she's like, I'm not sexually active. She will do brownies, but she's not sexually active. So that's interesting. I think that's where that's ended. Maybe we find out that she is sexually active. I don't know, or what happened, but like, it does sound like that is exactly what happened, was that she was removing bed sheets, and then there was human waste or matter on there, and she got it into her eye, and that's that. But it was funny. It was set up for a lot of great conversations between, I think it was Javati and Garcia, who are taking care of her. But that was fun. So I think, but just overall, 100%. On the right track for the Pitt. I'd give this episode an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's a good episode. I think it's built out the characters very well. I think we're still kind of jumping around, so it's hard to kind of see where all these stories are going to go and which direction. But that's what my rating would be. There's an interesting quote that I wanted to bring up just before we left. Was that Nurse Noelle Hastings, who was the one that kind of seemed to be romantically charged with Robby, mentions his travel plans. This is, I subscribe to the Falstaff, a Shakespeare reference, meaning discretion is the better part of valor. This reveals his reluctance to openly discuss personal matters in the ER space. So Robby continues to not want to really get in touch with his feelings. He's having everybody else, like, he is very therapeutic to everybody else. Like, let's talk about your feelings. What are you going through? How can I help? I'm checking up on Whitaker, checking up on Santos, checking up on McKay, Javati, Dana. He is fathering everybody, but he is not taking the time to sit himself down and go, dude, you are dealing with something, and we know you are. So that's going to come to a head. And I'm pretty sure it's going to come to a head in a conversation with Al-Hashimi or Langdon. I just have this feeling that's where we're headed. So I think that'll be very, very fun storyline to follow, as Robby is still continuing to suppress his feelings and help everybody else, when, again, that is what has gotten him in trouble in the past. Last but certainly not least, my predictions for episode 3 and beyond. Let's go character by character. I think Langdon continues to deal with procedures that he doesn't necessarily seem to find very fitting, but because he's kind of in the doghouse with Robby, he's going to keep dealing with these what feel like very small and insignificant injuries and things like that. But I do think it's either coming to a head with Louis, and Louis will have complications and have a close to death experience or a death experience in this show. And Langdon, then that's when he has this moment where he could go back and forth between rehab or like rehab again and doing drugs again. And that's when Robby steps in. Or I could see the fact where he just has this moment where he breaks down because he's tired of dealing with what he feels like is insignificant. And that's when he has the breakthrough with Robby because he's angry. So I think there's obviously a conversation coming. I think it will continue to push out towards the middle of the season. I don't think it comes anytime soon. I think it's like season 6, or sorry, episode 6 or 7 in this season where we get that play out, maybe even later, because I think they're going to prolong this, because I think they need it to, because it builds that tension. Because I think Langdon's still going to be making his rounds to every single one of those people. So maybe it's even later. Maybe it's episode 9, 10, and 11 that we start to get resolution with Robby. And Langdon, Dr. Mel, again, I think we get more and more with her deposition and her anxiety dealing with that. I think we actually see her sitting down with the lawyers here in the coming episode or so. What else? Al-Hashimi, we're going to get more and more what she feels like needs to be. I think she's going to even push the envelope even more. I do love the fact still that they are not making her an antagonist. They are making her just a person that exists in a world where there are differing opinions and beliefs, and not everything she believes is right, not everything Robby believes is right, but they're coexisting and they're not being unprofessional. Like, so many of these shows take like this very dramatic, like, I hate you, get out of my OR. It's not that. Like, there's moments where you're like in the pit where it gets to this, like, he and her are really hitting heads, but they're not like, get the hell out of my face. Like, that's where drama would normally go. But this is so realistic because, like, that doesn't get like that in the real world. Like, sometimes if you have a big blow up, but like, you don't ever go toe to toe with someone, a disagreement, and then all of a sudden you just get the hell out of my office. Like, that's just not normal. That's not like the norm. This is the norm. Like, having to navigate these waters together because you're just trying to work together and exist together. And they're both good doctors and team players and good people. And you can tell they're both empathetic, but like, you can also tell they've got their skeletons right in the closet, and they're trying to come to terms with each other. So that's where I think it's really interesting that they're taking this arc with each of them. They're not antagonists to each other. It's great. I love it. It doesn't feel like it's just so angry. I mean, I'm sure they're gonna have a moment where it's kind of dramatic, but I do like that it's very realistic, grounded in realism. Langdon, like I said, I think we're gonna get him going around talking to everybody and really figuring that out. Javadi and Ogilvy are obviously going to have issues, and then Javadi's mom's going to show up at some point, and they're going to have more. But this is more about Javadi proving herself. I think her ability to care for people is going to get her into the good graces of people. I think that Ogilvy is kind of brushes people the wrong way. I think that might come to a head too. Quan seems to be just kind of that relief of, like, she's very sarcastic. She kind of puts Ogilvy back in his place, but she hasn't really proven to be much as far as a character is concerned. She's kind of just in the background of most of these things. Santos, I do think we're going to get more and more about this girl, where maybe she starts to realize that she can't always be somebody's saving grace, that sometimes in this profession you can't always be the person in the right, that unfortunately things are going to go wrong and there's nothing you can do about it. I think that's where we're headed with her. I don't think she's going to get another case where she's like, oh, this is abuse, and she's proven right. I don't see it. I think they're brilliant in writing the show. I think it's going to be very much like, this girl's clearly struggling with abuse, but we cannot prove it. What else? Not what else. Who else? I think we've hit everybody. Dana, I think we're going to have more instances where Emma, starts to break down a little bit. But I think, it's really hard to tell where Dana is going. She has that moment at the end of the episode. It ends with Robby, Al-Hashimi discussing innovation tech, also like how they should interact. And then it's a great cliffhanger because they open it. This guy had been, I think, tased and arrested on a college campus, and he's freaking out like the Hulk. He's like smashing his hands, like, let go of me, get off me. He's got restraints on. He's knocked out somebody. Like, this dude's crazy, and he's in the back of the thing. He's really going through something, going crazy in the back of the ambulance. And they open the door, and Robby turns to Al-Hashimi and goes, what does your app say about that? Like, your app can't tell you the answers to everything. And she kind of has this moment of like, oh yeah, you're right. Like, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with him. So that was a great moment to end the episode, and kind of a cliffhanger for episode 3. So really, really excited about that. But yes, I think we pretty much have hit everybody. I think Dana and the nurse are going to have something. I can't tell. Oh, one last thing. we did not see into the waiting room that patient that was clearly dealing with not being able to hear, our deaf patient, we assume. We didn't see her this episode. So she's obviously not heard her. They keep calling her name. I think her name's Robin. Keep calling her name over the intercom. She's not reacting to it. So naturally, and you know, the ER doesn't know this. Like if you came in the ER, you got your paperwork. She kind of goes through the motions. She fills out paperwork. She returns it. You could actually do that and not hear people and do it correctly. And then they're like, "Well, hello, come back to the window. We need to talk to you. You didn't fill something out right." She's sitting down. They don't know if she can hear. Like there, I could see that. I could see in all the haste and here, just fill this paperwork out. I could see where, because it was so busy, because they might have just handed her paper and say, "Hey, go fill this out of your chair." She knew what to do because she's been to the ER or doctor before. She just takes the paper. She knows what to do. She fills it out, takes it back. They take it, and then they're calling her name because they might need some more info, or she can go back, but she can't hear. There could be that moment where she never made it clear that she was impaired, like hearing impaired, and that she can't hear, or that she needs somebody with sign language or ASL abilities. So yeah, but we don't see her at all this episode. So we're gonna get her eventually. I think it's gonna be this next episode is when we finally see her again, and I think we're gonna get to see. I guarantee you, somebody in the ER knows ASL, and that's what they're setting up. I'm interested to see who it is. Again, I'm trying to think of the characters that don't have a lot going on right now. I could see Javadi knowing it. I could see Ogilvy knowing it. I could see Mohan knowing it. Those seem to be the three that aren't really dealing with a whole lot right now that I feel like could make that transition in dealing with that. Maybe it could be Emma Nolan, our nurse. So we will see. I'm fascinated to, who's going to be there to talk with them. But obviously, they do have interpreters. Like they'll have screen. They either have screens where you can roll them and then they can do sign language through the screens from a remote location, or the hospital could usually sometimes has somebody on staff that speaks it. So we will. I'm fascinated to see what that storyline is going to be. I think it's going to be really good. I just don't know what that would entail, like what's going to happen with that patient. So we shall find out when we see her again. But again, great episode, 8.5, loved it. I'm really excited to see where we go from here, and I can't wait to talk about season 2, episode 3, which will air on January 22nd, a Thursday. We will be back next Sunday discussing this again. This episode is either going to go up late Sunday night or early Monday morning. I'm looking forward to my Game of Thrones recap. A Night in the Seven Kingdoms is debuting tonight, January 18th at 10 p.m. So I will be watching that. I'm going to be doing a recap with Jordan, this first episode, definitely, where we're going to be doing a collab between his podcast and mine. So look forward to that. It will be up on this feed on the YouTube channel as well. You can find us over on YouTube at the Screen Society Podcast. Anywhere you can find your podcast at the Screen Society Podcast. Find us on our socials, the Screen Society Podcast. We are on X. We'll be on Instagram and TikTok as we start to get more and more content. I'm probably going to start posting more next week. I'm going to do another episode next week as well. We'll be doing 2 different style episodes. One will be like a recap of things we were watching, and then the other one will be just a catch up on entertainment news, and then fun little discussions that we'll have that'll be separate from our recap. So that way it's not just recap. So we can cover more on this podcast. But we'll also have the Game of Thrones episodes coming. So we'll have 3 episodes per week for the time being as we move through these shows. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We really appreciate it. Follow us over on socials. Subscribe, like, comment on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. It helps people find us. We will see you next time, where we will be discussing the Pitt Season 2, Episode 3, and that episode will be called 9 a.m. See you next time.